The air hung thick and heavy over Willow Creek, a suffocating blanket woven from humidity, dust, and the cloying sweetness of jasmine. It was a heat that seeped into the bones, baking the red earth until it cracked like a parched lip and seared the souls of those who toiled beneath its relentless gaze. For Elara Beaumont, the summer of 1847 was not merely hot. It was a furnace forging the iron of her quiet spirit into something brittle and dangerously sharp. She moved through the grand yet stifling rooms of the plantation house like a ghost, her every gesture practiced, precise, and utterly devoid of joy. Her husband, Thomas Beaumont, was a man carved from granite and yielding, resolute and cold. Their marriage, a calculated union of lands and lineage, was a vast, silent chasm, bridged only by duty and the unspoken demands of their station. Elara carried her unfulfilled dreams within her like hidden jewels, glimpsed only in the privacy of her thoughts. The world outside, beyond the manicured lawns and the endless whispering cotton fields, called to her with a promise she dared not name. It was a life of silent endurance, punctuated only by the relentless rhythm of the seasons and the distant, mournful songs of the field hands. Then Josiah Thorne arrived. He came not as a planter but as a surveyor, a man who saw the land not as property but as possibility. His eyes, the startling blue of a summer sky, held a spark that ignited something long dormant within Elara. He laughed easily, a sound like wind chimes, and carried with him the scent of pine and distant roads, a stark contrast to the oppressive sweetness of the plantation. Their first meeting was accidental, beneath the ancient oak that dominated the property, its gnarled branches reaching skyward like the arthritic hands of an old deity. Elara had been seeking respite from the midday sun, a fleeting escape from the house and its oppressive expectations. Josiah, mapping a new boundary, found her there. A vision in muslin, a bloom of unexpected beauty in the harsh landscape. He spoke to her not as Thomas's wife but as Elara, a woman with thoughts and feelings of her own. He saw the flicker of life behind her guarded eyes, the hunger for connection in her poised stillness. Their conversations were stolen moments, brief whispers beneath the rustling leaves, each word a dangerous, exhilarating breath of freedom. Their love was a desperate, feverish thing, kindled in the shadows and fueled by the very danger that threatened to consume it. Josiah spoke of places she'd only read about, of mountains and oceans and lives unfettered by custom. He touched her hand once briefly, a jolt that went straight to her soul, a silent promise of a world where she might truly live. The ancient oak became their sacred place, a silent witness to their stolen kisses and whispered vows. The scent of jasmine, usually a symbol of southern elegance, now mingled with the earthy smell of the oak and the wild, illicit thrill of their embrace. Each clandestine meeting was a gamble, a fleeting plunge into a joy so profound. It felt like a dream, yet always shadowed by the stark reality of their situation. But secrets, like wild roots, always find a way to break through the surface. A forgotten handkerchief, embroidered with Elara's delicatesse, left carelessly in Josiah's saddlebag. A hushed conversation overheard by a housemaid with sharp ears and sharper loyalties. The watchful, knowing eyes of Thomas's overseer, ever vigilant for any deviation from the established order. The threads of their deception, spun so finely, began to fray. Thomas did not rage. There was no thunderous shout, no flung accusations, no shattered china. His reaction was far more terrifying. A stillness descended upon him, a glacial calm that froze the very air around Elara. His eyes, usually clouded with indifference, now held a terrifying crystalline focus that pierced her soul. He gathered his men with a quiet command, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. The hulking overseer, two burly field hands, and a stable boy stood ready, their faces grim, their obedience absolute. There would be no trial, no appeal, no gentle hand of justice, only Thomas Beaumont's swift, brutal decree. They dragged Josiah to the ancient oak, the very tree that had cradled their fragile love, now transformed into an instrument of terror. Its grand branches, once a welcoming embrace, now loomed like skeletal arms against the indifferent sky. Elara was forced to stand before it, her hands bound loosely behind her, her throat constricted, unable to utter a sound. Josiah's gaze found hers across the small, silent clearing. In his eyes, Elara saw not only terror but a profound, heartbreaking love, unwavering even in the face of oblivion. He offered no pleas, no struggle, only that last, lingering look that seared itself onto her soul, an image she would carry into eternity. The rope, thick and abrasive, was placed around his neck. Elara heard the creak of the wood as he was hoisted, the strangled gasp, the sickening, awful snap that echoed in the unnatural silence. the world around her blurred, colors draining from the vibrant green of the leaves, the stark white of the cotton bolls, the dark, impassive faces of the men, all became a single horrifying tableau of grief and despair. Thomas led her back to the house, his grip on her arm like a vice, his fingers digging into her flesh. He said nothing, not a single word of accusation or pity. He merely watched her, his eyes like chips of ice, ensuring she understood the absolute, unyielding dominion he held over her very breath. In the days that followed, Elara moved like a phantom through the sun-drenched rooms, her senses dulled, her heart a hollow ache. The sweet scent of honeysuckle, once a comfort, now brought a wave of nausea. The rustle of the leaves in the ancient oak became a phantom whisper of Josiah's voice, a torment she could not escape. Her body, however, held a secret far more profound and terrifying than the memory of stolen kisses. Beneath the restrictive stays of her corseted gown, a new life stirred, Josiah's life. The realization struck her with the force of a physical blow, a torment and a desperate, fragile comfort. She couldn't tell Thomas. She couldn't bring a child of her forbidden love into his house, into his wrath. The fear was a cold, constricting knot in her stomach, tightening with each passing day, each fleeting flutter within her. She planned, she prayed, she waited, trapped in a cage of her own making. Weeks bled in 2 months, each passing day stretching her secret thinner, yet more resilient. She disguised her growing belly with loose gowns, a strategic illness that confined her to her rooms, and the increasing isolation Thomas imposed upon her, whether as punishment or indifference, she could not discern. Her body swelled, a silent defiance against the grim fate that had befallen her love. Then, one sweltering night, as a summer storm raged outside, mirroring the tempest within her, Elara went into labor. Alone in the desolate cabin usually reserved for the sick, far from the prying eyes and ears of the main house, she bore her child. The thunder cracked overhead, the rain lashed against the small window, but Elara heard only the raw, primal sounds of her own agony. It was a girl, tiny, perfect, with a shock of dark hair like Josiah's and eyes that never opened. The storm roared its protest, the rain fell in torrents, but Elara heard only the profound, unbearable silence of her daughter's birth, a silence that swallowed all joy, all hope, all future, the raw, primal grief that tore through her. More devastating even than Josiah's hanging, left her utterly broken. She held the lifeless infant against her breast, rocking gently in the flickering lamplight, weeping silent, burning tears that traced paths down her dust-streaked cheeks. She couldn't bury her in the family plot beneath Thomas's cold, judging gaze. She couldn't surrender her to the earth where her husband's shadow loomed, where the whispers would inevitably begin. This child, her blossom, belonged to her and Josiah, to their stolen dreams. In the pre-dawn hours, the storm having passed and leaving behind a world washed clean, Elara wrapped her daughter in a swatch of muslin torn from her own petticoat. With a small rusted shovel she had stolen from the toolshed, she crept out of the cabin, a wraith moving through the thick pre-dawn mist. She walked past the silent cabins of the house servants, past the dark stables, until she reached the vast, whispering expanse of the cotton fields. The cotton was tall now, forming green tunnels that rustled like conspirators in the gentle breeze, their unopened bowls holding the promise of future harvests. She walked far, until the great house was a distant, shadowy silhouette, until she found a small clearing, marked by a lone, twisted stump that no plow had ever managed to dislodge. It stood sentinel, ancient and gnarled, a natural monument in the endless rows. There, beneath the nascent bolls that promised the very lifeblood of the plantation, Elara dug. The earth, softened by the recent rain, yielded reluctantly to her trembling hands. She laid her daughter into the shallow grave, arranging the muslin carefully, tucking a tiny, dried jasmine blossom beside her, plucked from the vine near their old meeting place. With trembling hands, she covered the earth, smoothing it until no trace remained, only a slightly raised mound that would soon be swallowed by the relentless, verdant growth of the cotton. She pressed her hand against the soil, a silent vow, a communion of sorrow, a desperate act of love. This was her daughter's sacred resting place, known only to her, beneath the ceaseless rhythm of the cotton, a secret safer than any lock and key. For the rest of her long life, Elara Beaumont walked the earth a shadow of her former self. Thomas, sensing her quiet despair, or perhaps simply weary of her broken spirit, left her largely to her own devices. She tended her garden, managed the household affairs with an almost robotic efficiency, and moved through her days with a quiet, dignified reserve that belied the maelstrom of grief and memory within her. Every season, as the cotton matured, growing from tender shoots to towering stalks laden with snowy bolls, she would walk to that specific spot, Her fingers would brush the soft, white fiber, a silent vigil, a whispered conversation with the earth that held her dearest secret. No one ever questioned her solitary ramblings among the endless rows. She was merely the quiet mistress lost in thought. The decades passed, the cotton fields changed hands, the old plantation house weathered and decayed, its grandeur slowly succumbing to the ravages of time. The story of Thomas Beaumont's swift, brutal justice against the wandering surveyor became a chilling tale whispered by the older folk, a cautionary legend in the region. Elara grew old, her face a roadmap of sorrow and resilience, her eyes still holding that distant, haunted look that hinted at unspeakable tragedy. On her dying day, frail and withered, her breath a fragile wisp, Elara lay in her bed, surrounded by the stern, unfamiliar faces of distant relatives and the quiet efficiency of her maids. The room was heavy with the scent of camphor and fading life. As her breath grew shallow, a flicker of light returned to her ancient eyes. She saw, through the tall window, the vast, sun-drenched cotton field stretching to the horizon, an ocean of green and white. She heard the faint, ghostly whisper of the wind through the boles, a familiar lullaby from a long-lost past, carrying echoes of stolen laughter and silent tears. A fragile, knowing smile, one that no one had seen in half a century, touched her lips, transforming her aged features. Her gaze drifted toward the window, then fixed on some unseen point far beyond, deep within the heart of the fields. "My little blossom," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a fragile thread woven into the silence of the room. "Rest well beneath the cotton." Then, with a final gentle sigh, Elara Beaumont closed her eyes. She took her secret, the tiny grave, the unspoken life, the enduring love buried deep beneath the whispering cotton fields, with her to eternity. The earth had kept her secret well, and now so would she.